Okay, hi, I'm Nick. My background's in architecture, and so today I'm going to be speaking about using 3D software to create art assets, particularly backgrounds. So this is going to be more of a why to do it rather than a how to do it, because that would take an entire degree program to talk about. So, sort of why would you might want to use 3D to create your art assets rather than drawing them the other ways that people have done backgrounds, either, filtered photographs or even just drawing it straight up? Well, there's a number of different reasons for doing that. One of the primary ones that I can see is that it really maintains a sort of a consistency and a sort of that you can sort of use any point in the workflow to sort of get your project done. So I'm just going to be flying through my models here while I'm talking. If I turn on some more of these layers here. So for example, I have this shrine that I'm showing here. You could draw it by hand originally, but say, if you get it sort of sketched out at a certain angle and you decide, oh wait, I don't like that sort of camera angle, I need something different. If you were drawing it, you'd have to start all over. Whereas if you make a 3D model, you simply, move the camera around, point it in a different direction. And then you can work from that point forward. So as opposed to modeling versus drawing, it can be quicker if you're skilled in it and if you're doing things that have repetition. Like, for example, these festival booths here, you only have to draw each festival booth once, and then I just copied it, in the specific location that I wanted. And then if I didn't like it in one location, I could easily shift that around, move them around, rotate, without having to redraw. It's already created. Then you just move the camera around to repoint it in the direction that you want. And then same with making any changes. If you draw something by hand, you don't like it, you got to erase, go back, do it again. When you're modeling, you can, take a door from one side of a building, move it to the other side of a building, and bam, it's there already. You don't have to redraw all those details again. So modeling, I primarily use it because I'm much better at it than hand sketching. I have a real problem in hand sketching doing perspective and proportion. But when you're modeling, you're drawing everything as it would exist in real life. Everything's drawn a 1-to-1 scale. So you know that in real life, a door is like 6 foot 8 inches tall. So you draw it in the model 6 foot 8 inches tall. And if you have a whole row of doors that are all going along one direction, you know that you never have to, keep that consistent. You take the door, you copy it, you move it, and they're all the same. So like any of these windows here, they're exactly the same. I don't have to worry about, setting up my perspective lines and drawing it and making sure they all line up. They're all there. And if I wanted to like change one of them, depending on the software that you're using, each one of these is a component. So if I wanted to change one window from one type to another, I make that change once, and then it changes every single window of that type in the model. So it's really good at maintaining consistency in your workflow there. And another good thing that you can do with modeling is that, modeling has a lot of different parts to the workflow. You have the model, you have camera, lighting, rendering, but you don't necessarily have to use all of those when you're making your images. Some people can go all the way from start to finish in 3D. Like, for example, you may be familiar with Uncle Mugen in the community. He's been around a million years, and he does a lot of 3D background stuff, and he generally takes things from start to finish all within the 3D program, maybe with a little bit of a touch-up in Photoshop, but generally that's right from straight to start to finish. But you don't necessarily have to do that. If you wanted, you could simply draw a model and get, just the line work. And then you could take that line work into Photoshop or Sci and then finish up your rendering on top of that. And again, with 3D software, depending on which one you're using, you can also get shading and shadows and stuff. So SketchUp is one program that does have lighting. So you can use that to get that. So you can get the shading, you can get the colors, or just do the line work. You can really choose where in the process you kind of want to start your workflow, and then at what point you want to shift that into another piece of software. But again, if you do shift to another piece of software, then you no longer have editability because you're not in a 3D model anymore. You're inside of the, the other software, and so you can't make those changes. So you got to make sure that if you're doing that, you got to shift over to that you've already decided that that's where you want to keep your changes at. So there definitely are some drawbacks to using 3D. You have to learn how to do it, but that's the same as if you're learning any other art style. Uh, it can be difficult to get a certain style. Like if you're drawing by hand and or if you're doing just the line work, once you take that into your other art programs, you can put whatever sort of stylizing that you want. But if you're going like straight for all the way through the rendering, most engines are default towards being photorealistic. So if you want something more anime or cel shaded, you're getting this sort of kind of flat bland that you might have to bump up in a different piece of software. And cost. I'm using SketchUp here, which the free version is almost fully functional, but the paid version is like $500. And a lot of other software, 3ds Max, Maya, they're all in the thousands and thousands. So you can use free SketchUp. Blender is free. There's others that are free and cheap, but the really powerful high-end ones are big bucks, and you probably might not be able to invest in that as well. So that's sort of the first point that I wanted to speak about. And then the second point is another reason to use 3D is that you can create an entire environment. Now you can, if you're using 3D and you already know sort of the camera that you want to get, you could just, draw in the specific part that you want. But if you create an entire environment, that can actually help inform the story. So the model I'm flying through here now is the school that I've designed. And so, when you take place inside the story, the environment can sort of tell you what's going to happen. So, this school has 4 floors. So you have, sort of the general stuff on the first floor, and then each grade gets another floor. So, if you have interactions between characters of different grades, you know that, okay, they have to travel between the floors to get there. How long does it take them to do that? And, depending on what side of the building that their classroom is located on, are they getting sun in the morning? Are they getting sun in the afternoon? Do they have to walk, like, is the gymnasium right next door? Or do they have to walk, a long way away to get to it? So creating a full 3D environment can sort of make a lot of decisions for you. Like, for example, in the game that I'm making, one of the characters lives at that shrine we saw earlier, which is, away from the city center. So she has to take, the bus to get anywhere. So what kind of impact is that going to have on the story, on her personality, when, having that setting of being far away from the rest of the city, whereas someone who lives, right in the downtown core can pretty much walk anywhere. So that's going to have a real definite impact on sort of the lifestyle of those characters, and that can, tell you what might happen to them in the story. Because I sort of think of storytelling as kind of having 3 parts. You have the plot, you have the characters, and you have the setting. And as an architect, I see that it seems as oftentimes people kind of miss setting as one of the things that they might overlook when they're creating their story. They have the interesting characters that they want to do. They know the story that they want to tell, but, what sort of world is this taking place in? So, like, the story can really kind of contribute to someone's personality in that manner. And again, with distances between objects, like if you have the school here, it's right next to downtown. There's a number of restaurants in the area. So it's like, okay, are students going to go and, eat at those restaurants because it's right there? Whereas like the clientele for a different store, like the working population, they're not right next to the school. So they're not necessarily going to be the ones to patronize those restaurants either. So I've done sort of an obscene amount of detailing on here because in creating these full environments, you definitely don't have to go that far. Only really need to go as far as you feel is necessary for creating your particular assets. I'm just going to fly through some of the things here. So these models are almost everything I modeled. There's a few objects like these instruments here that I used, ones from various 3D marketplaces, but for the most part, I'm drawing everything myself. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can go to like the 3D warehouse in SketchUp, make sure you check the licenses to see which ones you're allowed to use, and there's a number of other resources for getting 3D as well. So you don't necessarily have to draw everything yourself if you're just looking for that. And another drawback of using 3D, depending on what software, is what sort of things you can draw. Like SketchUp is good for flat, square things, but for any sort of organic material, you know, plants, trees and stuff, it's not. So that's one of the things I'm putting in post-production, but there's other 3D software programs that are better at rendering that. So it really all depends on, you know, what sort of environment you want to create, and then at what point in the workflow is that done in the 3D software, and at what point is it done in your post-production. Just continue to fly around here. So you can see like cafeteria, library, you know, all the sort of trappings that you'd expect to be in a school. And if I open up, let's see here. Hey, just a second. I'm loading my full model, which is gigantic. So it's going to take a second. Here we go. So I basically modeled up almost the entire city that my story takes place in. So I've got, you know, 10 million layers over here. But let's see.
I'll just interject here that everyone in the chat, their jaw is kind of dropping into the floor right now.
Yeah, you don't feel as though you have to go this insane. I went way further than I needed to. I wasted a lot of time modeling this, but it did also get me my full-time job. So, I mean, it wasn't a complete waste. I got my job doing auto shows because of all the work that I did in these models. So that also can help you in your other professional life if that's the sort of thing that you are looking for. And it gives me a chance to practice and show off all my architecture skills. But yeah, really, because when I was doing my master's thesis, it was on how can the built environment itself tell a story. And basically, I created an exhibition on Alice in Wonderland. So basically, I had a little space in an art gallery, and I sort of designed and built it up to feel as though the person who visited the gallery was going into Wonderland itself. So that was sort of, you know, we're in this environment, it's telling the story of Alice in Wonderland. So then working off of that, I also considered, okay, how can we reverse that? How can a story be used to sort of tell off this built environment space? So one of my hopes is that if you can put setting, maybe you don't necessarily put it number one as I have, but if you remember to keep it forefront, you really get a person stuck in a place and it feels, you know, like a real place. You can connect, okay, the movie theater over here, you know, it's kind of centered in town here, and then the harbor is down this away. So it's like, you know, the relationships in space between all these different places can definitely help you tell your story. So if you're, you know, getting roadblocks, you know, writer's block and trying to figure out what happens next, you can say, okay, what's going on in the story here? You know, what's going on in the city? You know, if it's maybe on one day it's a weekend, and then you have things like the farmer's market that's running on the weekend. So, you know, then you can take your characters there and see, okay, how are they going to react? You know, how are they going to interact at a farmer's market versus how they would interact with each other in a school setting? So it really offers a lot of opportunities when you have an environment in which to place the characters so that sort of the plot derives from that. Yeah, these models are. I've been working on this game since 2011, not continuously, on and off, but I definitely wasted some time detailing too much. And I've had to fork the model so many times because SketchUp can't handle all the level of detail. So that's why I had those other models earlier that were just of specific locations that more things occur in, and then the overall model that sort of keeps it together. Yeah, and of course it makes it really slow to turn all those layers on. I haven't even turned on the intense ones. I've got all the houses modeled up there. I've got, lamp posts and clocks and all sorts of things. So it really helps create a sense of place. It sort of gives an identity to where your story is taking place.
Wow. I think everyone's jaw is dropping, so I don't know. Do you want to open it up for questions now while you float around?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. All right, you
I
guys.
can't see the chat right now, so if you
All
just
right, I
be
will
so
read them
kind as
out
to
to
read them
you.
out. Thank you.
All right, so let's see what we got. Let's give them a second. So I'm going with just like first off, how?
How? Years and years of architecture school. I got my undergrad was 4 years, about 204 credit hours worth, and that doesn't even count the studio courses in architecture. They're listed as 6 credit hours, but it's 12 of instruction plus the million hours you spend. But you don't be overwhelmed by that. This is all practice. I didn't learn SketchUp in architecture school itself. I just learned, architecture. But learning any modeling program, learning anything, you just have to do it. One of the big tropes in any art is, you have 10,000 shitty drawings inside of you, and you have to get those out before the good stuff starts coming up. And so it's the same in anything else. Just do it. And look
All
at what
right.
other people have done too.
Uh-huh. So, okay, here's one question. Someone's been asking, do you have any finished backgrounds? What kind of post-processing compositing do you do when you with the raw renders?
I do not have any finished ones currently, but I know that there are other developers that use 3D. If you're familiar with Soviet Games, their background artist, Arsenix, I saw on his Twitter some time ago he was posting work in progress stuff, and it looks like he uses some 3D software. I think Jake, when he was doing the backgrounds for Lady Killer, I believe he did some of his work in 3D as well. But sort of the idea is that I'm going to take the image, place the camera where I want it, and then output that image and then open it up in Photoshop and basically just draw on top of it, things like plants, get all the shading and lighting and stuff appropriately. So for me personally, I'm using it to get the geometry because I'm not so good at doing the hand illustrating myself, but then do the rendering on top of it. So sort of look at whatever your particular strengths are and take it through the pipeline as far as you want. There are some people that have gone all the way. I believe Sam from Love and Space, his backgrounds were all the way from start to finish in SketchUp. And there's a few other developers that I can't think off the top of my head, but they've done various backgrounds in 3D programs as well, either with photorealistic rendering or even with cel-shaded rendering.
All right, any other questions? Finished renders, we already have that. Do you have any books you recommend for new environmental designers?
Books, any basic drawing books, any basic architecture books. I'll get a list and compile it. I can't think of any off the top of my head now, but there are certainly good ones. And for learning software itself, tutorials, online videos, if anyone has access to Lynda, I know that's a paid service, but there are really good tutorials there, or even just on YouTube for anything you want.
All right, let's see. Is there any more questions? So far, people are just overwhelmed.
Yeah, I understand.
It's awesome. This has been like I've been seeing this in previews, and I've just been going, "Wow, I can't wait to hear the story behind this thing," and it just kept going.
Yeah, like I said, I've been working on this for a long time. My studio is Sasuga Studios, so you can go sasugastudios.com or follow me on Twitter. I posted it in there. I've done the majority of my 3D work now, so I'm doing some other things right now. But you can look through my past dev blog. I've posted tons and tons and tons of images along the way, so you can sort of get sort of a view of what this city is like as a whole. You've only seen, these little fragments of it, sort of the ones that I'm most proud of.
Wow. So, well, as someone who doesn't know anything about any of this, so you had built this massive thing in SketchUp, and it's taken you like years of work to do this. So, in the future, like 5 years in the future, maybe SketchUp is or is not a thing that, are you gonna just carry this along to a different format?
Well, it's 3D geometry, so you can take it to any 3D software for the most part. I mean, there are issues converting between different programs, but in general, 3D data is 3D data, so that can go anywhere. And I've used this, like I said, I got my job doing this, and nowadays I draw in Inventor engineering drawings for the auto shows, but once you have, because it's sort of the raw data, and unlike a lot of other things, if you were working on drawings way back in the day, drawing like 800 by 600, if you drew at a smaller scale, suddenly, oh wait, my resolution, now we have these giant monitors and my resolution looks like junk. But here, since it's all 3D data, just like if you did something vector in Illustrator, you instantly, there's no rasterization issues at that point. I mean, once you take it into Photoshop and start rendering it, you'd get that issue. But on the whole, this data can travel as long as you have the ability to convert it from one type to another.
Cool. All right, Nick, are you good? Do you have time right now?
I want to go over to the shrine one more time.
All right. I'm gonna see if the other Nick is ready for his presentation. All right, he's good. So, all right. We're going to be about end of time here, so I'm going to put the other Nick on, Nick Johnson.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you for showing us this thing. We're all jaws on the floor here.
Yeah, and just real quickly, any of all of these smaller stuff that gets repeated, trash cans, signs, lamps, and stuff. If anyone wants those, I can make those freely available.
Wow.
Or if anyone even wants to play in the models, I can export certain versions of them if people just want to play around.
Awesome. We'll make sure to talk to you in Discord about that. All right.